Everyone, welcome back to the channel, your number one source for income-oriented investing. And in today's video, I'm going to tell you why we decided to cash out our two RRSP accounts. I'm in the process right now of actually doing it, cashing them all out. There's really 5 reasons, and this is really as a Canadian non-resident, right? I'm a Canadian non-resident. If I was still a resident of Canada, I would definitely not be doing this. In fact, I would still be contributing to our RRSPs. So let's get into the 5 reasons right away. So this, hopefully you'll understand the reasons why. Maybe you'll learn about how the RRSPs work, how they work when you become a non-resident. So let's get to it. The first reason is there's really no tax benefit anymore, right? So as a Canadian resident, when you contribute to your RRSP, dollar for dollar reduces the overall income when you're filing your taxes that year. Obviously, we know that it has tremendous tax benefits. But as a Canadian non-resident, once you declare your non-residency, you do your departure tax and all that, your final your tax return, you're no longer declaring any taxes in Canada. So there's really no point tax-wise or tax benefit-wise to have them. Reason number 2 is to unlock more cash flow. So I'll tell you a little bit about my plan, where this money is going later, but obviously it's going to be transferred, all of it to my non-registered, my regular account or my main portfolio. But this is going to unlock more cash flow. And in case you missed it, last week, or I don't know when this video is going to come out, but a Sunday ago, I released a video called Panama Update 2025 Update. And in that video, I described my living situation, our preliminary plan, basically to have 2 places here in Panama. So obviously expenses are going to go up. So it would be good and necessary pretty much to unlock a little bit more cash flow or easily accessible cash flow every month. And a lot of these reasons are going to be connected, but another reason number 3 is that I'm kind of already retired. I consider myself retired already. I'm going to be turning 40 this year, and it's time to enjoy life a little bit more, right? So this again goes with the unlocking more cash flow. We want to start traveling again more, which is going to be more convenient if we have a place in the city near the airport. And again, watch that video where I explain that in detail. Another reason is it's a lot easier to organize and manage. So how it works when you're a non-resident of Canada, and Panama does not have a tax treaty with Canada. So anything that comes out, just like when you're a resident of Canada, anything that comes out of your RRSP is taxed like regular income, which is not what you want, right? It's the least tax efficient. When you're non-resident, whatever comes out of RRSP. So right now, if I take out anything from my RRSP, even if it's a portion or a little bit or all of it, it's subject to the universal withholding tax of Canada, 25%. So the universal withholding tax in Canada is 25%. So I could have technically kept it and then every month extract some money that would be subject to 25% withholding tax. But I don't want to do that. It's more management. I'd rather just merge everything in my main portfolio to make it easier. So another reason is it's just going to be easier to manage that increased cash flow, if that makes sense. Another big reason is that as you know in our RRSPs, we really have only one fund, QDTE, in both accounts. QDTE is NASDAQ 100 with the round hill daily covered call strategy. So essentially it's the NASDAQ 100 index. And a big reason of why we're doing it, or another reason why I feel comfortable cashing it out, is because we have the equivalent, if not better, fund in Canada. And of course I'm talking about QQCL, right? So QQCL is the Global X, Canadian listed Global X enhanced NASDAQ 100 covered call ETF. So it's very, very identical, if not very, very similar. I actually think it's a little bit better in 2 regards, and maybe not as good in 1 regard, but the 2 beat the 1, if you ask me. So it's the NASDAQ 100, it's with covered calls, and it's with 25% leverage. So the advantage of QQCL over QDTE, in my opinion, is 1, it has 25% leverage. It's a very consistent payer as well. It is monthly. Also, the fee is 10 basis points lower at 85 basis points versus 95 basis points. So I'm not saying, this has nothing to do with me not liking QDTE. QDTE is my favorite US listed NASDAQ 100 covered call ETF, but because we have such a fantastic alternative, if not better alternative, and I'm going to show you the proof here, I'm going to have some numbers, some total returns here. I kind of like QQCL better. The fee is slightly lower. There's 25% leverage. You guys know that I'm a long-term investor, and having 25% leverage to something pretty boring like a NASDAQ 100 index or an S&P 500 index is a great idea. Also, the distributions are a lot more consistent, whereas, yes, they're monthly. I like weekly better, but the QDTE, they're not consistent distributions. I do like the actual QDTE covered call strategy better, the daily calls. I really, really like that. So again, this has nothing to ignore any comments you see about me about something like, oh, he doesn't like QDTE anymore. Nothing to do with it. I'm actually, most of it, and I'm going to tell you what I'm going to be swapping the money and how much money it's going to be total approximately. Most of it's obviously going to go in QQCL, which I feel is the number one NASDAQ 100 covered call ETF in Canada. But if I compare the two, I would say I like QQCL better, definitely because of that 25% leverage. So here is something I prepared everyone for you to compare. I want to compare QQCL versus QDTE. I want to see the total return. So to do that, what I really did is on the left, you have QQCL versus QQC. So QQC is basically the QQQ of Canada. It's actually also or the QQQM of Canada. It's just a NASDAQ 100 index fund managed by Invesco. So it's literally the equivalent of QQQ. So when you got to compare apples to apples, right? So QQCL in Canada, I'm going to compare it to QQC in Canada, and QDTE, of course, in the US, which is on the right side, we're going to compare it to QQQM. And I actually selected identical start date. So QDT came out on March 7th, QQCL earlier than that, but I actually used the same exact start and end dates for both comparisons. So if you look at QDT on the right side first, the top is with dividends reinvested, the bottom performance is dividends not reinvested, which means you're just using them as cash, right? You're living off of them. So obviously my RSPs, I was reinvesting them. And you could see that QDTE is still outperforming QQQM, which is still absolutely incredible to me. I don't know if that's going to continue. It's actually very, very close. But to me, QDTE or Roundhill has found the holy grail. If they could have very, very similar performance to the actual index fund, that's incredible. I've covered that in a past video. But without dividends reinvested, you see that QDT is lagging a little bit, not that much, but it is not outperforming QQQM if you're not reinvesting those dividends. Let's look at QQCL now. Again, same time frame. So QQCL with dividends reinvested is beating the index, right? 31.62 return versus 27.23, which is quite a significant amount of return. And I 100% credit, of course, Global X for the good management, but it's really that 25% leverage that I'm crediting here. We know that during this period, it's been mostly more up than down, definitely. But look at this, even with dividends not reinvested, it is still outperforming QQC. So from what I could see, or my assessment in this is that QQCL is actually the better fund. Another thing I forgot to mention is that, if you're wondering, well, you're selling QDT, which is USD, and I'll tell you my plan, what I'm going to do to QQCL. Isn't QQCL Canadian dollars? It is in Canadian dollars, but remember that QQCL is not currency hedged. So it's almost kind of like buying it in USD, because if the USD dollar gets stronger versus Canada, QQCL benefits, right? So this is, yes, you're buying and selling it and getting your dividend in Canadian dollars, but it's not hedged to Canadian dollars, right? So it's kind of like QDTE in that sense. So hopefully that makes sense. In terms of amounts, I'm expecting the total, and you know, obviously you guys saw it in the last portfolio and unveiled, and I'll show you now what my plan is. So in terms of amounts, this is basically it. So total Canadian proceeds after selling the QDTE is going to be about 625 to 630,000 Canadian. There's going to be 25% withholding that tax, obviously. So the net is going to be about 470. So how I'm going to do it, I'm going to use Norbit's Gambit, or AKA journaling shares. It's actually called journaling shares. Norbit's Gambit is just it's because a guy named Norbert invented this. So because it's such a big amount, I'm not just going to sell my QDT and then let Questrade convert the money. I'm going to journal the share so I could save on exchange conversion fee. So it's very easy because Questrade actually added it as a function within the application. So essentially it's very simple, guys. Step number 1 is to sell the QDTE. Step number 2 is going to be to buy DLR.U, right? Your .U means you're buying it in USD currency, and then make a request in Questrade to journal the DLR, all the DLR.U shares to DLR, which is in Canadian dollars, right? DLR.TO. And after that's done, sell all my DLR shares, and bang, I've converted basically USD to Canadian dollars to save. I calculated, you know, over $3,000, I think, each account of conversion fees, or maybe total, I can't remember, but it's fairly significant. It's actually worth doing it. If you're converting a couple $100, $1,000, it's not worth it, obviously. But if for big amounts, this is what you could do, and it's very easy. It's called Norbit's Gambit, and it's very easy to do. You're basically just buying one Canadian listed to US, you know, same ETF but in a different currency. You're kind of swapping them, so you don't actually pay any conversion fee. So once that's done, $1 million question: where am I going to put this 470? Well, as you probably already guessed, because it's all QDT, it's all NASDAQ 100, the majority is for sure is going to go in QQCL. I'm also thinking of putting a portion in HHIS, which I really like. It's actually, they just announced Broadcom and AMD, Google, Netflix, a bunch of other ones. So it's probably going to have about 15 total stocks in HHIS. I look at HHIS as a concentrated version kind of the NASDAQ 100. So maybe a little bit higher risk because it has less diversification. But I really like that the fee's only 40 basis points. I like that it's not currency hedged as well. There is some sort of diversification, but it is slightly higher risk, I would say, than the NASDAQ 100. So to offset that risk and just really, in terms of risk, kind of transition QDT into a NASDAQ 100 fully, I'll offset a little bit of that amount or that risk by also investing some in the S&P 500 as well, which I feel is the lowest risk out of these three, right? So I'm probably going to choose USCL because it's basically either USCL or HYLD, but USCL, along with QQCL, recently raised the distribution rate. So USCL currently has higher yield than HYLD right now. The fee is the same, but what I like about it is not Canadian currency hedge as well, just like QQCL. And obviously that is why USCL is kind of outperforming HYLD, especially lately. It's really because of that currency hedging. HYLD does currency hedge the Canadian dollar. They have a HYLD.U version, but I just want to keep everything on Canadian dollar to make my life easy. But yeah, HYLD. Another reason is that it's probably going to be more tax efficient for me because HYLD does have a little bit of bond exposure, and they actually hold dividend stocks as well. So I could expect that HYLD will probably have some foreign income. And as a non-resident of Canada, I've spoken about this before, I really want to avoid dividends and foreign income. What I really want is only capital gains in ROC. So I think USCL is going to have a little bit more capital gains in ROC, or it could be exclusively capital gains in ROC. So a little bit more tax efficient for me as well. So those are really the three probably that I'm going to put them in, right? Three of the core positions in my portfolio here. So NASDAQ, S&P, and HHIS. By the way, everyone, in case you're wondering, Adrian, why don't you just put QDTE in your non-registered account? Why bother going with QQCL? Why not just simply go with QDT as well in your non-registered? Well, that would be an unbelievable disaster because QDT is US listed, QQCL is Canadian listed. So let's just go through the stats. QDT, you see the fee, there's no leverage, but there's also a 30% withholding tax on dividends because as a non-resident of Canada and Panama does not have a tax treaty, I don't pay 15%, I pay the full universal withholding tax rate, which is actually 30% in Canada. It's not in the US. It's not 15. Canada gets 15 because there's a tax treaty, so it's cut in half. It's actually 30. So I would be paying a 30% withholding tax on all the dividends I would get from QDT, and I would get no refund the following year because the IRS simply doesn't care. They're not going to refund me. With QQCL, you see the stats there. There's the management fee is lower, 25% leverage. And the withholding tax, the universal withholding tax in Canada is actually 25%. But I would get 98 to almost, if not 100% of it back because it's Canadian listed and QQCL is pretty much all capital gains and rock. So I would get the majority back. So investing in QDTE versus QQCL is literally like a 30% handicap. It makes absolutely no sense. And by the way, even if you're a Canadian non-resident, it still wouldn't be worth. It would definitely not be worth holding QDT instead of QQCL in a TFSA or a non-registered because you would have a 15% withholding tax that you would not get back. You're much better off with QQCL. I have an entire video that talks about this. Make sure to check it out. I'll put the link in the video description at the top because it's very important, everyone. I feel very strongly about this, and I still see people put US high yield, no yield or growth like Tesla with no dividend is completely fine because remember, the withholding tax is only on the dividends, guys. Do not put US listed ETF, high yield stocks or funds in your TFSA or the non-registered because automatically you're down 15%. You might as well go with the Canadian listed equivalent. So again, watch that video where I go in detail about that. In terms of MSTY, so you guys know that I talked about this last time. I also want to unlock my LIRA because as a non-resident of Canada, if you've been a non-resident for 2 years, which I have been, you could cash out your LIRA as well. So in my LIRA, I have MSTY, the Yield Max MicroStrategy Covered Call ETF. And now that Harvest has their own and actually announced that MSTE is coming, right? MicroStrategy with covered calls and 25% leverage, which is obviously the format you guys know that I like more, the 25% leverage. Plus it has a much smaller fee, less than half of the Yield Max one, right? The Yield Max one is 0.99. MSTE is going to be 0.4. Also, it's non-hedged Canadian dollar. So obviously, my plan is to also cash out my LIRA as well. It's just more complicated and long because it's locked in, and Questrade, in case you're wondering for the process, I contacted Questrade. They said they need proof from the CRA, written proof that I have been a non-resident for more than 2 years. So I got to fill out a form, and it's just going to take longer. I don't know how long it's going to take, guys, but my plan is also to cash out my LIRA. So I don't think it's going to be done in February. But anyway, eventually the goal is to have no more RSPs and LIRA, have everything consolidated in my main portfolio, which is just going to be my portfolio now, I guess, right? The 2 TFSAs, which I'm never going to cash out, obviously, because there's no 25% tax on those. I don't need to cash those out. But the 2 TFSAs and my joint non-registered account. Another reason, like kind of small reason, this is actually convenient. If something bad, if something happens to me and I die, this is much less work and problems for Erica because she doesn't have to worry about getting access to my LIRA and my RSP. It's all going to be pretty much in the joint non-registered, and her name is there too. So there's also that convenience as well. So hit a thumbs up on this video, guys. I know it's been long and rambling on, but I owe it to you to really give you all my reasoning of what I'm doing. So I wanted to make this video before the next portfolio unveil update, because I know the RSPs are going to be done. So I'm going to refer you to this video for all the reasoning why. And again, 100%, make sure you understand it has nothing to do with QDT. It all has to do with my tax situation, my living situation, etc., etc. And remember, QQCL and QDTE are essentially the same thing, guys. So, let's get serious. But anyway, hit that thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm thinking of maybe doing a live stream where anyone could come on and ask me questions, because I know I did a lot of portfolio changes, consolidation. This is even another pretty big streamlining step. So let me know if you guys have any questions, if you would like for me to just do a live stream where you could come on and ask me all the questions you want about my recent portfolio updates. I don't mind doing it. I'm always going to be open and honest about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So thanks for watching. Appreciate your support, everyone. See you next time.